Hi, welcome back to Coding Games in Python. In this video, we'll talk about a very useful class called the Sprite class. This Sprite class will allow us to work with images. Okay, so Sprite is an image, either a PNG or JPEG, that represent a character or an object in a game. And Arcade Sprite class allows us to draw, scale, and animate the sprites. It even has a feature that allows us to detect collisions between complicated sprites, for example, complicated polygons. So to create a sprite object, it takes the sprite class constructor takes many arguments, but typically we specify the file name and then the scaling. And so, for example, if I say player arcade.sprite player.png, that player.png is an image, then 0.5 means that I'm going to take the original dimension and scale it down by half. And then the other features that you see on the right here, which we'll go to in the lecture, we can specify them as needed. So let's go to each of these attributes. So by default, if I create just a sprite as I did before, then it'll put the center X, center Y, the sprite to be at the 0, 0, or the origin. The sprite object has an angle attribute that allows us to rotate the image of our sprite. This angle is actually measured in degrees, and counterclockwise is the positive direction. And then the width and height is actually automatically initialized based on the image file and the scaling that we specify. So it looks at the image file and see the dimension, then it'll scale it, and then it'll initialize width and height. So for example, here's an image, the width and the height. We'll be using this in our example a little bit later. The width and the height is these dimensions. And then later when we talk about collisions, left, right, top, and bottom, these are attributes that are computed from the center X and center Y using the width and the height. So these are computed, and like I said, it's useful for collision. And then change X, change Y will help us move the sprite. So change X is the velocity in the X direction, change Y the velocity in the Y direction. And then change angle tells you how to rotate the sprite. And so, for example, later we'll talk about the draw and the update method that allows us to kind of work with the change X, change Y, and then the change angle. And so, for example, the draw method, this is one of the method from the class. It allows us to draw the image if an image file is specified. And then if we want to draw something else, we can also override the draw method to draw something else. And then finally, the update method will allow us to animate the sprite. So by default, the update method just simply add change X and change Y to the center X, center Y. So this allows us to move the image. And then it also add the change angle to the angle, allow us to rotate it. And so if we specify change X, change Y, then this will automatically move the sprite if update is called. And then if I specify change angle, then this will also rotate the sprite by an angle. And so typically we call update on each of the object or each of the sprite that we have in the game. And we do that from the onUpdate method from game window. And this is because onUpdate is the method that runs automatically 60 times a second. And so this is how we kind of create that illusion of animation. So let's see some example here. I'm going to go to Visual Studio Code, and so here's the setup as we had before. And these images that I have, if I look at the image folder, I actually have the tank image. This comes from the kenny.nl website. It has a lot of free images that you can use for your games, and we'll be using a lot of those images. And so, for example, I'm going to create a play object that is going to be a sprite object, and arcade.sprite. And if I specify the location of this is in images, tank.png. So if I do that, then I created the sprite with that image. And again, I don't want to if I don't specify the scaling, it will be the default scaling of the image. And then I can on draw I can tell it to draw. So after arcade.startRender, we say self.player draw, this will draw the image 60 times a second. And then on update, I can say cell.player.update. So this will change the position of the player if I specify a change X or change Y value, or a change angle value. But right now, by default, change X, change Y, all those are 0, and so this is really not doing anything just yet. So let me kind of run this. So again, by default, the sprite is at the origin. So we typically kind of change that in the program. So we use the center X attribute. Let's say put it at 200. And then we can also specify the center Y attribute. Let's say put it at 300. So this will move the sprite to be at center as 200, 300. So there's our tank. And then notice I can also specify scaling. So if I say 0.5, this will make everything, all the dimension cut by half. So if I do that, then notice it's half the size of the original image. Okay, so now let's see if we can try to maybe move it. So for example, if I specify the change X, let's say let's move it 3 pixels per second. So this will draw the player object, and then this update method, what it does is that it adds the change X to center X and add the change Y to center Y. And so in this case, it's only adding change X to center X. So it's going to move. This is a positive 3, so it's going to move to the right. So let me run that. So there it is. So tank moving to the right by 3 pixels per frame, because this is draws it, and then it these methods are called automatically 60 times a second, and then it's gonna update the position by adding change X to center X, and then it keeps doing this over and over again. By the way, if I take this out, then notice that even though I have a change X here, which is 3, it's not gonna animate. It's not gonna move it. So if I run that, even though my change X is 3, it's not adding change X to center X, so it's not changing the position of the sprite. So we need to have that that update method so that I can add the change X to the center X. By the way, I can also do player dot change angle. Let's say let's add, say, 4 degrees every frame. So if I do that, then and run it, then it's gonna move to the right and then also rotate by 4 degrees every frame. So again, all this is happening in player.update. Okay, so let me take this out. I'm actually gonna take this out also, and then I have included here some code from the previous video on keyboard inputs. Notice again, this is on key press. It runs automatically every time a key is pressed. If I press left, the arrow key left, then it's going to set my change X to be -5. If I press right, then it's going to change to 5. Up and down is similar for change Y. Now this is only setting the change X, change Y, and then if I were to release the key, then it set it back to 0. So if I press it down, by the way, this is very important, is that on key press is only called once. Even if I to press something and hold it down, this is called only once. But even if I call it only once, this is setting change X to be -5, and that value will be added to the sprite 60 times a second. So even though I press down the left key down only once, this is adding this value very fast, 60 times a second to the center X to move it. And so and then the only time that the tank will be stopped if I release the key. So if I release the left key, then change X is set back to 0, and then it will stop. So let me run that. So if I press left, it's going to go left. If I press right, it's going to go right. So there's the up and down. If I press the up and left, it go that way, etc. So this is for working with the keyboard. Okay, I also want to kind of clarify something about the angle. So I have another Python file here. So this is actually exactly the same thing as before, but I want to add a couple things to it to kind of clarify something about rotating it. So I want to try something here and kind of show you that this will produce a little bit of an error. So let's say I pressed the A character. I want to do player.change angle. Let's say that if I press the A, I want to change it by 90 degrees. So if I press the A, then I want it to rotate 90 degrees and then maybe move in a different direction or something. And so let's do this, and also do down key release. So if I release the A, then it will go back to 0. So let me run that and see what it looks like. So if I press the A, then it's gonna rotate 90. But the problem is that even if I press it and release right away, it's gonna rotate very fast. The reason because even if I try to press and release it, my releasing is not gonna be fast enough to stop it from rotating more than once. Because if I press it down even for a little bit more than a 60th of a second, the update method is already adding that angle multiple times to my my original angle, and so this is adding too fast. And so what we want to do probably in this case, let's say I want to rotate 90 degrees every time I press a key, and I don't want to rotate too fast, then I would do something like this. I would say I'll go back to this and say angle plus equal to 90. So notice this is a little bit different than the change Y here, and then I'll remove this one. So what this does is that, again, if I press down, let me kind of run this here. So notice if I press the A, now it's rotating, it's not doing anything too crazy. Even if I press it and hold it down for a second, it's only rotating one time instead of rotating many times like before. So again, this is if I want to change direction and move in a different direction. So again, notice the difference here is that if I press and hold the say A, this is called only once. And the reason why we can move change X, change Y fast is because the update method is updating this very, very fast. But if I want to move it, just rotate it only once, I might want to just do add it manually 90 degrees, so that if I press and hold it down, this is only is rotating it once. So hopefully that kind of clarifies on key press. Okay, I think that's all I want to say about from this video.